Welcome everyone to our virtual coffee. And can everyone see this full screen here? Okay. So
perfect.
Take your 3 minutes to tell us about Stream Tracker.
So once again, I'm Kira Puntini Desmond, and I'll kick us off by introducing the project Stream Tracker, which is based out of Colorado State University. And the main focus of this project is mapping and monitoring flow conditions in smaller streams. And more specifically, we're looking at intermittent streams, so streams that do not flow continuously in time and space. That will dry at some point during the year. And the motivation for this project is that a big portion of our understanding of our stream systems, especially in mountain environments, is based off of the monitoring that we do on the larger perennial streams that flow year round. And we know very little about all these smaller streams that are a major component of water being contributed to these larger streams. And so, in order to learn more about these small intermittent streams, we turned to crowdsourcing. So you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and so this is where Stream Tracker was born. And so participants, they joined the project online. Our project is hosted on citsci.org, which we'll hear more about later. And then the participants, they use their mobile phone to navigate to either established stream sites where they cross roads or trails, or to use their phone GPS to establish a new site that can then be tracked by fellow stream trackers. And then at each of these sites, they record whether they see flowing water, whether they see standing water, whether the stream channel has dried, or whether the channel is covered by vegetation or snow, which is also a really valuable metric. And then they also have the capacity to take a photo. And this data that they collect gets uploaded to the online database. And what we start to form are these periods of records for these smaller stream channels, where we start seeing when the stream was flowing and then when it stopped flowing. And then we're able to take that data and we're starting to use it to inform why are these streams intermittent, what's leading to these conditions, and then also how are these streams changing over time, either to climate factors or also changes in land use, or major disturbance is one that is a prevalent one in our area from fire and floods, and just learning more about these smaller stream channels. But then what we have been finding is that the people involved in these projects, so the citizens, they range from either avid outdoorsmen, because these streams are often remote, where we're really taking advantage of hiking trails or roads that people travel down to get to these hiking trails. So the recreationists, all the way down to middle school and high school students who just have an invested interest in the watershed they live in. And this project has really changed how people are viewing where their water comes from, and really expanding their understanding that not all streams look like their big river running through their town, and that these smaller streams play a really critical role in where our water comes from.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. So I think Kate now is going to talk about Goat Tracker, right?
Yes, great. So I didn't say who I was. I'm a fellow at the Safina Center. That's a center in Long Island, New York. I'm also a contractor with the Wildlife Conservation Society until at least the end of this month. They have been one of the supporters of this project. I was lucky to meet Greg at a Human Dimensions conference when I was a visiting scientist at CSU last fall. So that's how my relationship with CITSI came about. And that has been our main citizen science web platform for this project. So as I said, I'm in the Yukon, which is the upper extent of Mountain Goat Range, using iNaturalist in the beginning, around April of this year. We identified the Yukon as one of the photo gaps, which is why I came up here to do some remote camera trapping to fill that gap. We have been crowdsourcing photographs of mountain goats to address the question of whether their winter coat shedding patterns and phenology is changing in relation to climate change. And we wanted to use people's photos to look at change over time and space. So the main criteria for, you can go back to that first slide. I'm still on the first one, sorry. So one of the main criteria were that the photos are time and location stamped. So on the slide that you see here, those were the three main ways in which we crowdsourced photos. It was our website on citsci.org. It was an iNaturalist page that we put together. And it was also posters hung in public places. We also have a Facebook page. And we did, in addition, reach out to professional photographers whose portfolios have mountain goat photos in them. So now if you do proceed, please, thank you. What did we do with those photos? We essentially plugged them into Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop. We isolated the animal from its background, and then we outlined the shed and unshed areas. So as you can see from the photo, ideally we can see the animal from the side and we can see the entire animal. We did try to at least plug in data on the goat's sex, which was obviously a lot easier when goat nannies had kids. They're not the easiest animals to sex from photos, or even when you do see them in the wild, they're quite challenging. The sexing is based on the diameter of their horn and the curvature of their horn. And then we used pixel counts in Adobe for the shed and unshed areas, and calculated the extent shed that way. And just to have a quick visual, we colored those in. So we have these rendered black and red images that we saved as PNG, and that we would share with iNaturalist or with contributors of photographs, and we would tell them the pixel counts for the shed and unshed areas, and give them this nifty rendered version of their photo as part of our interaction with contributors. So if you do proceed to the last slide, the outcome of this. So again, we started in April. So we have about over 500 samples that we have processed. That does not represent all of the photos we have. It's just what we have managed to hand process. And we could have really benefited from AI or machine learning and that pixel counting. And so we are, Greg and I and a group of others have just put in a grant proposal for an AI for Earth grant, so that we can process more. But here you see the source locations of our photos so far, and over 70% of these were crowdsourced, so contributed by non-researchers. So you can see that we have covered most of Goat Range, which you can see the mountain goat range in light blue. So our photos come from all the provinces, territories, and states where there are mountain goats, with the exception of Northwest Territories and Nevada, and that's just a very small portion of their range. Let's see. I think the last thing that I would like to say is that it's been a really non-threatening and relatable way to engage people. It's essentially asking people, when did you take your winter coat off versus when do other animals? And it's a pretty easy thing for people to understand and relate to the phonology of, I suppose. We're in the analysis stage now. So thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. And Megan, I think you're up next to talk about the Front Range Pika Project.
The Front Range Pika Project is a partnership between my organization, Rocky Mountain Wilds, and the Denver Zoo. And what we do is we engage volunteers in studying American pika in Colorado. We've been doing this since about 2010, continuously monitoring pikas at 45 sites across the Front Range. And we've been expanding to other parts of the state this year. You can go to the next slide. So that's a baby pika, really cute. People are pretty excited about volunteering to study pikas because they're so cute. And what we're trying to do is to get a handle on how pikas are doing in Colorado and how climate change specifically is impacting them. And then also how climate change is impacting alpine ecosystems. And then the other goal is to get our volunteers engaged in taking action around climate change. You can go to the next slide.
I did have to take one of your slides out, just so you know.
Okay, that's fine. So pikas are really sensitive to changes in temperature, in snowpack, and in vegetation. And so they're a good indicator of impacts of climate change for things like snowpack and for other species that depend on snowpack and also on vegetation. So we're interested in them for that reason as well. Go to the next one. And they've been declining across the West since about 2010 and completely disappearing from some places where they were historically present. So there's a lot of concern about how they're doing. In Colorado, we think they're still doing pretty well, but there's some recent research from Rocky Mountain National Park that predicts they'll be lost from the park by 2100 under climate change scenarios, potentially. So that's why we're studying them. And what we do is we have volunteers do presence absence surveys for pikas. So they go up to historically occupied talus patches in the mountains where we know that pikas were present in the past. And then they do presence absence surveys. So they look for pikas, listen for pikas, and look for fresh hay piles, which are indicators that pikas are present. And then they also collect a bunch of habitat and climate data at the same time. So it's actually pretty intensive citizen science project, and people have to go through classroom and field trainings before they do that. You can skip that one. I think I already kind of talked about that. So I guess there's 3 agencies now that are using our data on pika, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the National Park Service, and the U.S. Forest Service. And then we've worked with a bunch of other researchers and other pika citizen science projects across the West to put together a paper that we just submitted to Nature Climate Change that is looking at ways to predict climate impacts on mountain mammals, and I think it's got some really interesting results. So that's exciting. And this year we had about 100 volunteers. I think they did more than 80 surveys. That data is still kind of coming in because we just finished our field season, and they spent about 90 days in the field. So we're getting a lot of great work out of our volunteers. And I think that's all.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Impressive. Okay, Greg. Oh, no, sorry, Ryan. You're up. Let's talk about snow.
Yeah. So I get to share with you one of my PhD projects today, and it's all about crowdsourced citizen science-based snow depth measurements from backcountry users. And we have a website called communitysnowops.org, and I work with people here at Oregon State up in Alaska, and also someone at University of Washington. You can advance. So what I'm trying to do is ask the question, can I incorporate citizen scientist-based snow depth measurements from the backcountry into the model chain? So I use this process-based, physically based model to simulate snowpack, and we want to constrain our snow distributions and the snow water equivalence outputs from the model using these citizen science observations of snow depth. You can advance it now. So what we've done is we've tried to connect with communities that are backcountry users, like backcountry skiers, snowmobilers, and also the avalanche professional community. And we realized that they have with them a measuring device when they're out for safety purposes. It's just an avalanche probe. It has centimeter marks on it. And we've asked them to take a couple of quick snow depth measurements and then upload those to our website using the Mountain Hub app. And we've worked in conjunction with Mountain Hub to establish a little filter that they can enter in the snow depth. You can advance it. So how do we reach the people that we care about? We targeted first the avalanche community near Thompson Pass, Alaska, up in Valdez. And last year we had a university press release that then got picked up by Washington Post, New York Times, NPR stations. We even did a Seattle TV channel video, and then we started writing to outdoor magazines and reaching out to nonprofit organizations and other individual professional athletes, and we've had a lot of success. You can advance it. Unfortunately, this is a video, so you won't get to see that, but it just shows all of the different measurements that came in after this press release, and we had in the thousands just in a couple of months all over the continental U.S. Coming in from mountain ranges in Colorado, the Sierra Nevada, and the Cascades, all throughout the West. So you can advance it now too. And we've had pretty good results. So this is just quickly SNOTEL on the x-axis and modeled snow water equivalents on the y-axis. And we were able to improve our modeling. We calibrated the model, and this shows an RMSE of 22 centimeters across the entire year. But if you advance it one slide, you can see that we were able to bring that RMSE down for the entire year at the SNOTEL station down to 4 centimeters from 22, and I'm working a lot to try to improve that even more. And you can advance one more slide. And this just gets us back to the project goal of being able to, on the right, we have modeled snow water equivalents with these citizen science observations input into the model and constraining the snow water equivalence output. And on the left, we have without any observations. And we're getting a lot closer to what we're seeing as the distribution of snow across the landscape, just using these citizen science-based observations. So that's all I really had for us today. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ryan. And we can always post the video on the website too.
Sure.
Okay, and now we're going to wrap up with Greg Newman, Dr. Greg Newman from CSU.
Yeah, so, you know,
Three minutes.
my little 3 minutes is really non-existent without the great folks that you just heard from. It's super, our mission is to empower the research that you're hearing. And so serendipity happened a while back when I was doing my dissertation many moons ago now, about maybe 10 years ago. Well, as a plant ecologist, I was working on invasive plants. We needed some more observations from private landowners of the whereabouts of those invasive plants, much like Ryan just mentioned, to improve our models. So we were doing species distribution models, and our models were not predicting well with good accuracy because we were sampling only public lands and we were not getting the full picture. So we engaged landowners to help us gather and crowdsource more observations from more places. So what emerged from that effort was a web portal called citsci.org, next slide, with the mission to provide comprehensive support for programs like the one we were doing with invasive plants. So next slide. Its 3 goals are: 1, to support the full spectrum of citizen science needs; 2, elevate the rigor of citizen science data; and 3, improve standardization, sharing, interoperability, and access to these information. So basically provide a platform where anyone anywhere can do projects and science that they would like to do. We like to think of it as science by the people for the people. So next slide. So what emerged was this platform that has now grown far beyond what I anticipated, but very exciting to see what the creative ingenuity in the room we have here and elsewhere is doing with the tool. So next slide. Basically, we have a list of projects that's grown to some 600 to 700 of them now globally. Next slide, you can search and filter for projects. What each project gets when they create a project is like a Facebook page. It's like basically a templatized homepage for your project where you can customize it to your needs. So you're telling it what the science you'd like to do. So next slide. You're also kind of telling the system how you'd like to govern participation in your project. We've seen several examples from the Front Range Pika project, which actually wants volunteers to apply. There's a waiting list. It's such a popular project. And then actually go through training. So they do a regular training down at the Denver Zoological Foundation down in the Denver Zoo. Then they do a field-based training at Loveland Pass. And so they want to vet and improve the data that they get and ensure the quality of that data through the trainings they offer. So basically they have an approval process where a volunteer once trained submits, and joins the project. And since they've set the project up as project manager member-based, Megan then clicks the approve button, and then the member is added to the project as a volunteer. Alternatively, we heard from Stream Tracker and others that they're doing some crowdsourcing stuff. So you can instead set your settings for your project to be open to all. And so someone can just click join and in they come. So the different governance needs for different types of citizen science. So next, you can create measurements and tell the system what you'd like to measure, whether it be the depth of snow or whether it be the presence or absence of stream flow. So that's done through this datasheet creator. Where you specify the units of measurement, you specify the protocol basically that your volunteers follow to submit and record observations for you. So the next slide, that results in a data sheet like this. There's two primary ways people use this creator for location-based information. We really need to know the who, what, when, where of something. And here is where you specify that. The where is done in two ways. It's either done with a predefined monitoring location, which is something that you want your volunteers to go to these locations, or in the case of perhaps Ryan's situation, wherever the skier might be, they tell the system where they are and where they took that measurement. So that's a second example of a data sheet. Next slide. In addition, if you happen to have a project running, so in your regions, in your mountain regions that have done some monitoring for 10 years or so, you can upload that data in bulk. And then once data come in, whether from a mobile phone or a web form on the project or from a bulk upload, you get an observation like this. If a photo was taken, you see it. It basically spits back what the volunteer just submitted for confirmation purposes. And so then we're really excited about building out and more improved statistical and data visualization capabilities. You get to see the data coming in real time in charts and visualizations such as that there. You can also see data on maps, where projects are, who's doing what where. That has proven very fruitful. So next slide. You can also query data kind of in a GIS context and look for just the data from the Front Range Pika project in a sea of other yellow dots, which are data from other projects. So you can slice and dice data in that way. And then finally, you can compare sites. So, as scientists, we want to make comparisons. So this is a case of Trout Unlimited volunteers comparing two parameters, the blue and the black, at 4 sites. And the system is automatically creating standard errors for your assessment and learning to see maybe if there's differences in those sites. And then finally, visualizing relationships, right? So maybe there's potential linear relationships between variables being measured or what have you in the data. So then finally, communicate with your volunteers. We're really wanting to expand this portion of our platform to allow folks to get notifications and say, hey, there's a gap, we'd like you to go, we need more data in this particular county, we need more data in this particular state, so get on it, and or be notified when new observations come in, sort of like what you get with a Facebook app on your phone with new notifications. So finally, last slide, make all this on a mobile application. We've struggled with our mobile application, to be perfectly honest, and we're redoing it with some more improved programming. This is a very challenging endeavor because it's about 1,000 apps in one. If there's 600 projects, you could have any number of data sheets for those projects. You're looking at 1,200 data sheets. This app needs to respond to those unique needs of each of those data sheets and display it and have it function properly. I'm going to skip this due to time, but there's a lot of impacts that citizen science, as we've seen, can enact. But be sure to think about program evaluation. How you evaluate whether you're reaching your success goals. So that's about, last slide, I think all I have.
Great. All right. Nicely done.
That's a lightning talk.
That was a lightning talk. Okay, great. Thanks to all of our presenters. Really excellent and quick summaries of your work. So we'd like to now open this up to discussion. Let me see if I can get our webcam. If folks want to ask any questions to any of the presenters, feel free to raise your hands and we can get the discussion going. I'd encourage you to also use your webcam, because when you talk, the camera will go on and we'll all be able to see you, which makes this slightly more intimate, even though we're all in different areas. So, and I'll have Kara will kind of monitor the hands. I guess I can start with a question to some of the panelists. So sometimes I wonder about this, is this a one-way street? Like, what are the citizens getting out of it? It sounds like there's a waiting list for the PICA project, but I also think about the applicability of this to other countries, other places around the world. Have you all thought of this? And do you see that this is a model that could work at other places? And is this an equal partnership? Or so does someone want to speak to that question?
Yeah, I mean, I can start the conversation. I didn't have time to talk about citizen science and how it unfolds as a phenomenon. We saw several examples, but not at near the breadth of examples that are out there in the world. And so from my perspective, what constitutes citizen science is public participation in scientific research. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a one-way street. That's a great question. There's a great paper by Shirk et al. In Ecology and Society that talks about the flavors of citizen science. I have a slide on this often that I share that talks about contributory models of citizen science, collaborative approaches to citizen science, and co-created citizen science. And it's the 3 C's of different approaches to citizen science. And many flavors that are not well presented in these examples are on that, but fewer perhaps are on that co-created side. So we're really looking at like participatory action research and other types of approaches to engagement. And so in all cases, regardless of whether you're a contributory, a collaborative, or a co-created project, closing the loop with the volunteers is essential, as I'm sure all of these panelists will attest to. The volunteers want to hear the impact of their work. And the number one thing the literature is showing is that you got to close that loop and communicate back to the scientists your results on a regular basis. So I'd open that up to the other panelists who are actually running projects to see their experiences with that.
I can speak to that a little bit in our project with Community Snow Ops. So one of the things that we've been doing a lot of time brainstorming and coming up with a plan about this past year, just in the past couple of months, are 2 things. One of them is we're planning to communicate with surveys with our users and ask them why they're doing this, why they're choosing to do it, and what they want out of it, or what they are getting out of it. So we're designing surveys to do that this coming winter, because almost all of our participation is obviously during the winter. So we're prepping for that. But another thing that we've been trying to figure out is what can we give back to them, and how can we do it kind of in a very quick manner. So one of the things that we thought about, a lot of the people that are out skiing, they really pay attention to snow and weather, and they know mountain weather really well. And so we were thinking about trying to quickly, when they submit a measurement in some place in the Wasatch or in the Rockies, be able to generate like a short climatology based on the prism grids of the normals for precipitation, the normals for snow in that region. Snow is a bit harder, like snow depth is actually not, this is why we're doing it, it's not easy to get like a normal for over an entire mountain range for snow depth, but we want to give them some meteorological information about that place. But then also we think that we might be able to link them to the closest SNOTEL station and give them some kind of information based on that SNOTEL station that has snow water equivalence and snow depth that's close by. But again, it's not going to be representative of all the places that they go, even if there is a SNOTEL station close by. So we're working on being able to give that back to them within the day, even within the day that they submit. They will, if they choose to be a part of a group. One of our problems also is that we are working with Mountain Hub, and the Mountain Hub app is we did not design this app. They designed a field for our project, and so they're reticent to give us their user information. And so what we have to do is basically create a group within the app that's Community Snow Ops, and if they opt in to the group, then we can contact them. So we're trying to work out the kinks right now. We have several more years of this project, so we're trying to get on that right now, but it's something that we've been talking about.
Thanks for your insights. Do we have any other questions? Or I was wondering, I don't know, Ava, if you could speak to this. Is citizen science or Jessica or Ida too, is citizen science more popular in Europe? Are you seeing this? It seems to be really gaining in popularity here in the US, and I'm wondering what the trends are elsewhere.
Yeah, I can try to answer the question. I think there are a lot of projects in the UK, and also it's getting more and more popular in other European regions. But I was especially interested in mountain biodiversity projects because we have this mountain biodiversity portal where you can now upload data. So and we try to populate that with more data. So my question to your projects would be, how do you control the quality of the data?
The data quality question has been studied countless times by countless people. They've actually been, in some cases, very rigorously studied. So you'd actually have volunteers go through a litany of tasks once trained up following the standard citizen science projects protocol, and then have professionals follow that exact same and replicate that exact same protocol right after the volunteers, and then do variance analysis to look at the variability in the observations. In different contexts, different species, you get different results. That's the upshot. So you have to pick your challenge and pick your approach very, very thoughtfully. And very skillfully to make sure your protocol is amenable in a citizen science context. And in many cases, when it is, you find little to no significant difference in the variability and accuracy, frankly, of the data submitted between the volunteers and professionals. Whereas if your protocol is not quite amenable, you see significant differences and need to be aware of that. Additionally, I should add that sometimes data volume trumps data quality, and so eBird is a good example of this. Well, there's well-known situations in the amateur birding community where the species identification is completely wrong. But the quantity, the sheer volume allows for some very novel statistics. And Daniel Fink at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has done some great publications on this, where you can do some data mining to then subset your voluminous data set and extract the high quality information out of it. So if you're a charismatic, really exciting project that happens to generate tremendous interest like eBird, you have that luxury as a statistician. So quality is controlled in that way. Most cases we work with are much more local, a little bit more controlled, and therefore very thoughtfully engineered and designed to have training protocols in place whereby volunteers, once trained, can give some sort of assurance. Additionally, you should add the obvious, right? So you can have repeat of observations. So you can have a team of volunteers measure an observation and assign that volunteer that monitoring site, but strategically also assign another volunteer that same site and the same general time. And so now you're getting repeat observations by multiple people, and you look at consensus statistics, right? And you look at agreement type work, and you say, okay, how much level of agreement are we seeing? Additionally, don't forget the ubiquitous photo verification submission. Photos mean a great deal to taxonomic identification. You can then crowdsource the vetting of those identifications with experts, and you can subset the photos selected and submitted by volunteers and have a subset of them be reviewed by experts, taxonomic experts, and get levels of accuracy that way as well. So multiple ways.
You know, Greg covered a lot of what we do, but I think basically it's a combination of training, carefully designing our protocol so that we know that it's something volunteers are capable of doing. So for example, we don't have volunteers use fresh scat as an indicator of pica presence because figuring out whether or not pica scat is fresh is really difficult. So we kind of use things that we know people will be capable of doing. And then the other thing that we have done is we've built a bunch of kind of checks into the process. So we do repeat surveys at all the sites with different volunteers and compare them. And then sites where we have absences, which luckily there aren't very many of in Colorado yet, we will send a professional researcher to check that because that's really important to know if we're starting to lose picas. We have volunteers take GPS coordinates at the site so we can check their location. We have them take photos so we can check that things like the fresh hay pile is actually fresh. So there's a whole bunch of things you can kind of build in on the back end when people are submitting their data to be able to check that they're doing things well. Yeah, so I think that's kind of how we do it. And then we contact volunteers if their data looks off, because sometimes it's, you know, they did a typo or something and it's not actually wrong. So, but we have a small enough group of volunteers we can do that. I think that would be fun to do with bigger projects.
Yeah, I once got a submission for 1 million wildebeest, and I was like, really? So Matt was asking to sort of piggyback off of the what's in it for them question. Do you send like PDFs of research papers back to participants? Is there some feasible way to mention all the citizen scientists in your acknowledgements or as co-authors on papers? Just something that they can then say, hey, look, I was part of this, here's my name. It's sort of like contrary to the IRB where you're like not supposed to include people, but they want to be acknowledged.
I'll just quickly comment on that. This is Kate. I'm trying to put my camera on, but I'm not sure that it's going to work. Oh, okay, here we go. So we are doing a report now to our funders, one of which is NPS. And what we've decided to do is after the cover page where our names will appear, we're going to do a word cloud of the names of the citizen scientists who have contributed photos to the Mountain Goat Molt Project. And the size of the name corresponds to the number of photos people contributed. So Sumio Harada, who's a photographer based in Montana, who has contributed quite a large number of photos, his name is going to be front and center and quite large. But so will some of the citizen scientists who have uploaded photos to CitSci. So that was just an idea that a few of us came up with. Let's just acknowledge the citizen scientists, but rather than listing their names, let's put them in a word cloud. So yeah, I don't know what people think about that, but that's what we're going to do. It actually makes people feel like they're co-authoring, I suppose. And I guess I have even thought about if we do get to the publication stage and we have had a contributor who has perhaps not just with photos, but contributed some observations, and certainly Sumya Harada is one of them. For example, one of the things he has noticed is mountain goats rubbing particular parts of their bodies because of high tick loads, which obviously plays into how we evaluate their shedding patterns and is indirectly related to climate change. Observations such as those could even warrant a citizen scientist co-authoring a scientific publication with us. That's all I have to say.
I'll briefly add to Kate's story there. In my experiences, I've seen all of these examples happen. So I've seen acknowledgements in publications happen. I've seen really a citizen science white paper kind of science communication oriented report built by the Urban Ecology Center in Milwaukee, where they have an annual report back to the volunteers that show a more consumable understanding of the results that have emerged from the work that field season, which is really great. And then I've also seen co-authorship in the Galaxy Zoo, the Zooniverse. They take this very seriously, and the physics community is much more open to co-authorship with and by volunteers, and it has happened. So all three of these things are ways you can acknowledge volunteers. I think the portals like the Community Snow Ops portal and CITSI and iNaturalist, this is Spotarun in the UK, the European Citizen Science Association has formed. I was just over there in Switzerland talking with folks this summer. There's a lot of great citizen science, a lot of great portals. Some are very topic specific, some are more broad. Regardless, those portals have immense value for acknowledgement of effort as well. So people love to see their name on the homepage of a portal, and they say, hey, I'm a recent observation, and there's my name. So at a bare minimum, that level of acknowledgement goes a great deal far.
The one thing that I would add is that we've also done this thing called ambassadors. So we have people that are citizen scientists that we're highlighting on our website as people who are really active in trying to recruit other people to take measurements. And so we have, I think, 4 or 5 right now. And so their names are there, and their work is really highlighted. And I think we want to continue to include them in the entire process. And then we also have, because we have a website, we update them with blog posts and updates from the modeling process every couple of months, and we do that all in that website and on the blog. So we have ways to reach them.
Cool. My question or comment is more of something else. It's just that I have another student who is, sorry, I have to move because my phone is ringing in the background. I have another student who's working on a project with Dall sheep in Alaska, and we have hunters cameras deployed all over the place, originally to map snow cover in these areas where the Dall sheep are foraging and migrating up and down in elevation. But what we found is that using this free facial recognition software from Google called TensorFlow, that if you train it with pictures of Dall sheep, that you can just feed it like, thousands of photos, and it'll pick out all the photos that have Dall sheep in them. And I suppose we could probably train it more exactly to look at, like, whether it's a ewe-like sheep or a ram or a lamb or something like that. But I was wondering if others have played around with this kind of recognition software, because it's free and pretty easy to program. We had an undergrad programming it to do this. It's like a little Python script, basically.
Yeah, iNaturalist uses TensorFlow, it's my understanding, to do the species recognition algorithms that they've built into iNaturalist, and it's exciting. I've talked with Scott Laurie at the Cal Academy of Sciences, and it's pretty exciting to see how accurate that TensorFlow software is being in recognizing even in plant species. So pretty exciting, and I think it's actually a really great thing to look into if you need the recognition type software.
Yeah, and it's my understanding also that some Park Service people are using it for recognizing wildflowers so that they can identify, like at Mount Rainier, they identify the timing of peak wildflowers, and then because they're able to basically scrape that information from people's posts in publicly available photos, and then compare that year to year for the timing of peak wildflowers.
So I think there, Jessica, your hand is up. Do you have a question?
The conversation, thanks. The conversation's moved on a bit now, but I just wanted to make mention of a few. There are some really interesting citizen science projects happening in the UK, especially by the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. They do, they do biological recording. They have like a biological recording scheme and a plant monitoring scheme and predatory birds, and also on air quality. And I think here at University of York, the Stockholm Environment Institute is working in East Africa on they're developing a health and well-being in cities citizen science project, and they also have work with disadvantaged communities in the UK through, I think it's called the Opal Explore Nature initiative, and that's trying to get young children in communities that don't typically interact with nature as much to kind of count bugs and look at tree health and do air surveys. So there's some really interesting work happening here.
Julie, if you don't mind too, I want to take just 2 seconds to mention a conference coming up in March in 2019 in Raleigh, North Carolina, put on by the Citizen Science Association. Highly encourage all who are interested in this topic to attend. It's a hotbed of wonderful discussion and breakouts and workshops and practical trainings on how to really design and implement effective citizen science projects. So for practitioners and researchers alike, a great place to learn more.
Wonderful. That might be a great place to wrap up. I think this is just sort of opening the window for some of us on this really important and fascinating topic. And so certainly if folks here are interested in carrying this conversation further, you can let me know and we can, get this group together in more discussion. So thanks everyone for joining us. If there's a topic that you would like to discuss in this forum, in this virtual coffee forum, also please let me know and we'll try to organize one, or if you want to lead a session, we always welcome that as well. But I've learned a lot today, and we will again try, hopefully this recording worked, so we will post it, and you can, if there are people who weren't able to join, they can watch the follow-up video. So thanks everyone, really appreciate your time. I know we're all busy, but it was great to have this conversation. Thanks to our presenters too.
Presenters, it was great.
You did a great job. I really, really thank you for that.
Thanks for having us.
Until next week.
Julia.
Next time, bye.
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 Bye.